you're not alone. You're being spoken to. When you feel lonely, you think something is missing. A person, a purpose, a place where you belong. But what if loneliness isn't emptiness at all? What if it's a voice speaking words you've been too distracted to hear? Al-Ghazali discovered this 900 years ago, and it changes everything. Maybe it happens in the morning, before anyone else wakes, before the house starts moving with its familiar noise. You open your eyes, and there it is, that feeling, not quite sadness, not quite fear, something heavier, something that sits in your chest like a stone you can't name. Loneliness. Have you felt that? And maybe you've learned to push it away. Fill the day with tasks. Turn on the television. Call someone. Anything to avoid that silence pressing against you. But what if I told you that Al-Ghazali, the man who walked away from fame, wealth, and the respect of thousands, discovered something about loneliness that changes everything? What if loneliness isn't what you think it is at all? Al-Ghazali was 37 years old when he lost his voice, not metaphorically, literally. He stood before hundreds of students in Baghdad, the greatest Islamic university in the world, and his throat closed. No words came. His tongue, he said later, felt like wood in his mouth. The doctors examined him, found nothing wrong. But Al-Ghazali knew what was happening. His soul was refusing to speak lies anymore. For years, he had been teaching, writing, debating, building a reputation as the most brilliant mind of his generation. But inside, he felt hollow. Every word he spoke felt like ash. Every student who praised him made the emptiness worse. Does this sound familiar to you? So he did something shocking. He walked away, left his position, his income, his students, his status, everything. He went to Damascus, alone. And for the first time in his adult life, Al-Ghazali sat in complete silence. No one to impress, no one to teach, no one asking him questions, just him and the loneliness. But then something happened, something that scholars tried to hide for centuries because it sounded too dangerous, too intimate. He discovered that loneliness has a voice, and it was speaking words he had never heard before. Pause for a moment. Think about your own loneliness. Not the loneliness of being in a crowd and feeling unseen, not the loneliness of losing someone. I'm talking about that specific loneliness that visits you in quiet moments. When the day ends, when everyone else seems busy, when you sit and wonder why this feeling won't leave. Do you know that feeling? Al-Ghazali said something radical about this. He said, "The loneliness you fear is not abandonment. It is the removal of everything that was distracting you from hearing what Allah has been trying to say." Let those words settle. Not abandonment, removal of distraction. There's a difference. And it changes everything. Think of it this way. Imagine you're standing in a marketplace. Hundreds of voices around you. Merchants shouting, children laughing, donkeys braying, endless noise. Someone across the market is calling your name. But you can't hear it. Not because they're not speaking, but because everything else is louder. Have you ever experienced something like that? Al-Ghazali realized that most of his life had been that marketplace. Noise, constant noise, the noise of ambition, the noise of other people's expectations, the noise of his own thoughts about who he should be. And in all that noise, he couldn't hear the one voice that mattered. So Allah removed the noise, and what felt like loneliness was actually the first moment of true listening. But here's where it gets deeper. Notice something about your own life right now. What noises have fallen away recently? What relationships have become distant? What activities no longer interest you the way they used to? What if those aren't losses? What if they're clearings? Al-Ghazali didn't just discover that loneliness creates space for hearing. He discovered that loneliness itself is the voice. Let me explain. In his book, Ihya Ulum al-Din, Al-Ghazali writes about something he calls al-uns bi Allah, intimacy with Allah. But this word uns, it's interesting. In Arabic, uns means intimacy, companionship, comfort in someone's presence, the opposite of washa, which means feeling strange, alien, lonely. So the phrase al-uns bi Allah literally means becoming so comfortable with Allah that you feel at home in His presence. But here's the paradox Al-Ghazali discovered. You can't reach uns without first experiencing wahsha. You can't reach intimacy with Allah without first feeling the loneliness of everything else falling away. Does that resonate with anything you're experiencing? Because loneliness, real loneliness, is the soul recognizing that it was never meant to feel at home anywhere else. Think about thirst. Thirst isn't the absence of water. Thirst is your body speaking, telling you what it needs, directing you toward what will satisfy it. You don't curse thirst, you listen to it. Al-Ghazali said, loneliness works the same way. Loneliness is your soul speaking, telling you what it needs, directing you toward the only presence that will ever truly satisfy it. But we've been taught to silence it, distract from it, fear it. We've been taught that loneliness means something is wrong with us. What if it means something is finally becoming right? So what does this voice say? Al-Ghazali spent years listening, and he wrote down what he heard, not in commands, not in grand visions, in whispers, small recognitions, shifts in how he saw everything. First whisper, you were looking for me in the wrong places. Al-Ghazali realized he had been seeking Allah in books, in knowledge, in the approval of scholars, in doing everything right. But Allah wasn't hiding in any of those places. Allah was in the space between his heartbeats, in the silence after his breath, in the loneliness he had been running from. Have you been looking in the wrong places too? Second whisper, everyone you loved was my gift, but they were never meant to replace me. This one hurt. Al-Ghazali had to confront something difficult. He had been using people, even good people, loving people, to avoid the one relationship that required complete vulnerability. The people in his life were blessings, but he had turned them into shields. And when Allah removed the shields, Al-Ghazali finally had to face what he'd been avoiding, direct encounter. But then came the third whisper, and everything changed. Third whisper, your loneliness is not a problem to solve. It is a threshold to cross. This might be the most important one, because we spend so much energy trying to fix loneliness, find the right community, the right schedule, the right balance of socializing and solitude. But Al-Ghazali discovered that loneliness isn't something to fix. It's something to walk through, like a doorway. On one side, the world of people, tasks, distractions, noise. On the other side, the presence you've been hungry for your entire life without knowing it. But you can't get to the other side without walking through the loneliness. Have you been trying to fix something that was actually an invitation? Sit with this question. What if your loneliness is not a sign that something is missing, but a sign that something is finally being offered? Now here's the practical part. Because Al-Ghazali didn't just write about this, he lived it, and he taught a practice that anyone can do. He called it khalwa, sacred aloneness, not isolation, not withdrawn from life. Sacred aloneness. And what he discovered through this practice changed his entire understanding of prayer. Here's how it works. Step 1, stop running. This is the hardest part. When loneliness comes, your instinct is to fill it immediately. Pick up the phone, turn on something, make plans. But Al-Ghazali said, wait, just for a few minutes. Sit with it. Don't try to analyze it. Don't try to pray it away. Don't try to fix it. Just let it be there, like sitting with an old friend who doesn't need you to say anything. Can you try that right now, even for 30 seconds? Step 2, ask one question. Not, why am I lonely? Not, what's wrong with me? Ask this, what are you trying to show me? Direct the question to Allah. Out loud if you need to. In your heart, if that feels more natural. And then, this is crucial, listen, not for a booming voice, not for a clear answer. Listen for the subtle shift in how you feel, the small recognition, the gentle knowing that rises in your chest. That's the voice. Have you ever heard that quiet knowing? Step 3, thank the loneliness. This sounds strange, I know, but Al-Ghazali said that everything that brings you closer to Allah, even if it feels painful, deserves gratitude. So thank the loneliness. Thank it for clearing away the noise. Thank it for revealing what really matters. Thank it for being the doorway you didn't know you needed. Al-Ghazali did this every day for years, and slowly something shifted. The loneliness didn't disappear, but it changed shape. It stopped feeling like abandonment. It started feeling like accompaniment. There are some things you can only learn in loneliness. Al-Ghazali wrote that knowledge has 2 types. Ilm al-Raz, knowledge of the head, the kind you get from books, teachers, study, and Ilm al-Qalb, knowledge of the heart, the kind that can only come through direct experience. You can read 1,000 books about tasting honey, but until you taste it yourself, you don't really know. Loneliness is where heart knowledge happens, because in loneliness, there's no one to perform for, no one to impress, no one to convince, including yourself. In loneliness, you meet who you actually are, not who you present to the world, not who you think you should be, who you are when no one is watching. And that's terrifying at first, but it's also the only place where real transformation happens. Does that frighten you? Or does it feel like relief? Al-Ghazali said something beautiful about this. He said, the heart is like a mirror. But most people spend their lives holding the mirror up to other people, trying to reflect what others want to see, and so they never see their own face. Loneliness is when Allah turns the mirror around. And when you finally see your own face, really see it, you also see His, because your face and His were never separate to begin with. What has loneliness shown you about yourself that you couldn't see before? What truth have you been avoiding that loneliness is now making impossible to ignore? You might be wondering why this matters, especially if you're older, especially if loneliness has been your companion for years now. Maybe your children have moved away. Maybe your spouse is gone. Maybe your body doesn't let you do the things you used to do. Maybe the world feels faster and stranger, and you don't quite fit anymore. Does any of that describe your life? And maybe you've been told, or you've told yourself, that this loneliness is just what happens, that it's the price of aging, that you should accept it and make peace with it. But Al-Ghazali would say something completely different. He would say, this loneliness is not the end of your spiritual life. It is the beginning of of the deepest part. Everything you've lived until now, every relationship, every experience, every joy and a heartbreak has been preparing you for this, for the stripping away, for the silence, for the encounter that can only happen when everything else has been removed. Think of it like this. When you were young, you climbed a mountain with a heavy backpack. Food, tools, supplies, everything you thought you needed, and the climb was hard because of the weight. Now you're older, and one by one, things have been taken from the backpack. You thought you were losing things, but you were being lightened, so you could finally reach the summit. And what's at the summit? Not emptiness, presence. The presence you've been climbing toward your whole life without knowing it. Have you ever thought of your life this way? Al-Ghazali climbed that mountain, and he turned around and said to everyone still climbing, "Don't fear the lightning, don't fear the loneliness. It's not taking you away from life, it's finally bringing you home." So what happened to Al-Ghazali? Did the loneliness go away? No. But it transformed into something he never expected. After years in Damascus, years of silence, solitude, and that sacred aloneness, Al-Ghazali returned to teaching, but he was different. His students noticed it immediately. He no longer spoke like someone trying to prove something. He spoke like someone who had seen something. His words were simpler, quieter, but they landed deeper because he was no longer speaking from books. He was speaking from the place loneliness had taught him. And people felt it. They felt that he knew something, not intellectually, experientially. He had crossed the threshold. One of his students asked him once, "Master, you were lonely for so many years. Did it ever stop hurting?" And Al-Ghazali said something beautiful. He said, "It stopped being loneliness, and it became conversation." That's the secret. Loneliness doesn't disappear. It becomes something else. It becomes the language you speak with Allah. It becomes the space where His presence is most clear. It becomes, if you let it, the most intimate relationship you've ever known. Can you imagine that? Your loneliness becoming conversation? So here's what I want you to know. If you're lonely right now, truly lonely, you're not broken. You're not being punished. You're not forgotten. You're being spoken to. And the voice speaking to you is the one voice that will never leave. The one voice that has been waiting for this moment, waiting for the noise to fall away, waiting for the distractions to clear, so it could finally say what it's been trying to say your whole life. I am here. I have always been here. And now, finally, you are here too. This is what loneliness is, not the absence of presence, but the presence of presence, the presence you were made for, the presence that will still be there when everything else, every person, every pleasure, every distraction has faded. Al-Ghazali spent his whole life teaching people how to reach Allah. But in the end, he realized something simpler. You don't reach Allah. You stop running from Him. And loneliness is how He stops you. So the next time loneliness comes, and it will come, don't fill it. Don't fear it. Don't run. Just listen. Because you're not alone. You're being spoken to. And what Allah is saying, if you're quiet enough to hear it, is the only thing worth hearing. Welcome home.